Cambridge got wind that this guy had that, and they purchased it from him. So that's how they ended up with the data. And Cambridge claims that they deleted all that data, but it's not clear if that's the truth. So I think there's a lot more investigation that has to go into this. There have been a bunch of denials from Cambridge that they've admitted to later, surrounding this stuff, and so it seems like they're hiding something. And I think there has to be some investigation, some serious investigation into whether or not this data was shared with the Russians in their influence campaign.
I mean, the fact that Trump received it is kind of bad enough from this kind of subversive site. And I just want to be sure these activities of kind of harvesting this Facebook data, that is illegal. That's not allowed. Am I correct in saying that? Just to be clear for everyone.
I'm not sure if it's illegal, but it went against the Google's privacy policies. Users can say whether or not they want their profile data private or not.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently, many people who opted out of that and said, "No, I want to keep it private," their data was released and got into the hands of the researcher and eventually Cambridge Analytica, despite that. And so I don't know if that's illegal or not. It might be. I'm not sure, but it certainly is a black eye against Google. Yeah,
definitely. Facebook and Cambridge have kind of been a little bit fighting over this over the past since 2016 kind of. In several accounts since the business began working on the 2016 campaign, there was kind of a furious debate between the two about the firm's merits of so-called psychographic modeling techniques. But the full scale of the data leak involving Americans has not been previously disclosed and Facebook until now has not acknowledged that it happened. Interviews with half a dozen former employees and contractors and a review of the firm's emails and documents have revealed that Cambridge not only relied on the private Facebook data, but still possesses most or all of the trove. So they still have this data with them to use in the future. So sure, it could be outdated in the next 2 years, coming in the 2018 midterms or the 2020 elections. During a week of inquiries from the Times, Facebook downplayed the scope of the leak and questioned whether any data still remained out of its control. But on Friday, the company posted a statement expressing alarm and promising to take action. Paul Grewal, for example, a VP and Deputy General Counsel to the social network, called it a scam and a fraud. But then there's Alexander Nix, who's the chief executive of Cambridge Analytica, and other officials. They repeatedly denied obtaining or using Facebook data. So again, this is definitely a big problem here. We need to kind of keep an eye out that this is not happening in the future.
And I misstated before. I said Google. I meant to say Facebook.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was gonna. Yeah. All right. So now we do, in fact, have to move on. And we will be moving on to the Democratic Party. Nancy Pelosi, a few hours after Connor Lamb, the Pennsylvania Democrats, claimed victory in a House race with a vow to oppose his party's leader, Nancy Pelosi, the once and perhaps future Speaker, was explaining to a group of female congressional candidates why she did not retire after 2016. She intended to do so after Clinton won. Pelosi recalled on Wednesday at a DCCC reception here, but she intended to, but she stayed to ensure Washington had at least one woman in power, which is kind of a little bit of a strange motivation. But, I mean, to some lawmakers, though, who described her remarks, the message was clear. Pelosi was not going anywhere. And what do you think the relationship Nancy Pelosi should have with the Democratic Party? Do you think they should have strong ties, or maybe not so much?
Well, there was a vote, not that long ago, about her leadership, and she was able to maintain it. From what I understand, she's very good at raising money, and that's a huge part of being the leader. But the albatross that she puts around the Democratic Party is that she's too liberal, and so she becomes a punching bag during political races, for Congress.
Yeah, I mean,
so I mean, it is what it is. There's pros and cons about her if you're a Democrat, but I think that it might be better for the Democratic Party if she quietly stepped away or retired. She's pretty old right now, I think. I don't know if she's 80 yet, but she's getting on. And it might be time for her to step aside and put somebody who's a little bit more moderate in that position, who can't be the target of every political ad on TV.
But, I mean, that's where kind of I disagree with you, because can't the Democrats, if they had kind of a backbone here, they can't be like, say, in Connor Lamb's race in particular, where he came out early against Pelosi, he's coming in the race, he was like, okay, I'm against Nancy Pelosi, I'm sorry, I disavow everything. But that just seems so stupid and so weak, especially coming from the position that she's too liberal, which is ridiculous, because just recently she supported an anti-abortion, anti-gay Democrat in Illinois, Dan Lipinski. She supported him, she endorsed him and everything. So the fact that she stands by that person as being called too liberal by Republicans is ridiculous. And the fact that Republicans managed to make a race where they were having a special election to replace the Republican who resigned because, after being very pro-life, pressured his mistress into having an abortion. The fact that they had a election where that was a special election where that was the circumstances come about a referendum on Nancy Pelosi is kind of ridiculous. And the fact that they can't just come out and say, just turn the narrative, make it about something else. I just don't understand why they cannot do that. And they have to, again, face the pressure on Nancy Pelosi. And the fact that when Nancy Pelosi, I mean, I just don't subscribe to the notion that she is very too liberal at all. She is, in my opinion, too far to the right. She's non-committal on many key Democratic Party or leftist core issues that many people in her base support, but she still is uncomfortable with. So maybe, I mean, I personally wouldn't have a problem with her stepping aside, but it depends who comes in. And I think that when we see moderates like Connor Lamb coming out and saying, "Oh, she's too liberal," that worries me greatly, just to say the least.
Well, there's the truth about whether she's liberal, and there's the perception about whether she's liberal. And perception often becomes the reality for many people if they can successfully make that claim. And Republicans have pounded into the minds of Republican voters that she is liberal. And even if she's not, it hardly matters. If she becomes a foil for the Democratic Party, then it doesn't really make much difference. If she's costing the Democrats races in Congress, then she's a liability. If she can somehow change that perception at this stage of the game, well, good for her, but I don't think she can. So, yeah, I can see where you're coming from, but it's very difficult to, at this stage of the game to change the narrative around her.
Yeah, but I mean, when you say this stage of the game, I do kind of see where you're coming from on that. But the point is, like, she did do some reforms that Democrats should be proud of and should be like almost kind of bragging about. Not that she was a real true progressive champion; she was not in any sense of the word. But the fact that Republicans, the fact that we can't do some pounding of our own, some pounding back and saying she's a Democrat, she's totally fine. The fact that she let herself get like this, it is to some degree her fault for not kind of fighting back on that front. It's really a testament to the sad state of the Democratic Party. I mean, there is kind of a question. there's kind of a question that is going around, like how do you handle this? That is the very interesting situation. So, anticipating the strategy from the right, Democratic candidates are increasingly opposing her as Speaker or refusing to take a stand, an act of political inoculation, kind of supporting them there, a trend that even her allies acknowledge could ultimately imperil her grip on the Democratic caucus. So, Steny Hoyer of Maryland, Joseph Crowley of New York are actively trying to lay the groundwork to seek the leader's job if Pelosi's position becomes untenable. Neither of those guys I feel very comfortable with in the Speaker's position. They're both very right-wing Democrats. A Democratic House candidate descended on Washington last week for rounds of training and fundraising. The topic of how to confront Pelosi came up repeatedly, according to multiple officials. I was in D.C., and that's the advice everybody gives. Don't say you're for Pelosi. Representative Brad Ashford of a Nebraska Democrat trying to reclaim his seat said he would not rule out backing Pelosi. That was the advice everyone was trying to give him there, though. It is a little bit worrying, and I think the person who becomes the next leader there in the House will be very interesting, because it's not just enough to have the name Democrat, have the D next to your name anymore. You have to actually support Democratic policies and Democratic positions, because there are those people out there who'll be like, I'm a Democrat, but I'm pro-life, or I'm pro whatever Republican thing you're for, pretty much. And that is the disturbing thing to me about Democrats in the future. All right, so yeah, I just want to give you any chance to have a last word on this, because we're about to move on to our last story of the day.
Well, I just want to say that the problem with the Democratic Party right now is that they only are winning on the coasts.
Yes.
And if they want to win back some segments of the middle of the country, they have to start moving toward a more moderate position. And this is a national trend, and the Democrats are getting squeezed from every direction. And so, if you're gonna give candidates who are running for Congress in the middle of the country or in the South a chance to beat Republicans, then you have to give them every benefit possible. And if the Speaker of the House is going to be a liability, then that's something you have to look at seriously.
Yes, I do agree with you there. But like when you come to like shifting more moderate position across the country, I was just wondering, like that's the interesting thing, because there is a lot of interesting positions here that one can take, like whether you're socially conservative or economically conservative as a Democrat. That can be a little bit dangerous, because it comes to a point where how will you distinguish yourself from a Republican? And the thing is, the concept of the Overton window moving so far to the right over the past even 5 years, the fact that in my personal opinion, Democrats should not be afraid to push it to the left a little bit more, because it's just been shifted by the Tea Party, by Trump. It's really gone so far to the right.
Well, I mean, my pushback for that is that polarization in the country is our biggest problem right now. Everything is so politicized. It didn't used to be like that. There used to be moderate Republicans, moderate Democrats. The middle used to be the strongest. And now what we're seeing is that the extremes of the left and the right are the strongest. And that it causes a huge problem in Congress. Nothing will get done. And the American people will not stand for that. It means that the president has to have executive orders to try to get things done. And that's an unhealthy thing for our democracy. So, you have to kind of take your own personal feeling about your own, politics and say, well, is that really the best thing for the country? And I don't think it is. I mean, I'm more politically to the left as well, but I have real concerns about how polarized our politics are right now.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to if you can get things done and if you can convince other people to join you on your side, as just based on polling right now, a lot of people seem to be on the side of the Bernie Sanders side of people. if you can get people to come around to your side, then I think you will definitely be a very